what does this system of classification do to influence the sort of vitality or the sort of viability of languages like Manegacha, particularly with distribution of resources and things like you were just starting to mention? What is the sort of influence there?
Hmm. Yeah, thanks. So the Minzu system is kind of like ostensibly it is an ethnic classification system, but when it comes to languages, it's kind of a system which um, does two things. The Minzu system in relation to languages basically decides what languages exist and don't exist in the eyes of the state. And then secondly, amongst the languages that do exist, it creates a hierarchy between them and distributes resources accordingly. So between the languages that exist and don't exist, the official position is that there are 56 Minzu in China, one Han majority and 55 minorities. Um, each of those Minzu is supposed to have one language because they are nations, right? In the same way that, European nations, French, French in France, German in Germany, etc., right? Which never was real, but it was the ideal of the nation state was supposed to look that. So China is organized as um, there's a phrase from the study of Russia, a scholar called Francine Hirsch referred to it as an empire of nations, right? And China was organized along similar lines, where the Minzu system classified everyone in China into one of 56 Minzu, and each of those Minzu was supposed to have a language, right? There's 300 languages in China, probably around 300 languages. So when you have 56 Minzu with one language each, everything beyond that just gets cut out. Those languages don't exist from the perspective of the state. So those languages are downgraded to the status of a dialect. When you have a dialect rather than a language, you don't get funding, you don't get institutions, you don't get media, you don't get representation, you don't get resources, you don't get anything. Those languages just get completely shut out, right? Interestingly, we like in China studies, people often talk about like ethnic politics in terms of like Han domination over minorities, which is a valid way of thinking about it. But when we look at it from languages, a lot of those languages that get completely cut out are Han languages as well, right? So what we would think of, like what the average person on the street in Manchester would think of as Chinese, is not a language. It's a group of related languages which share a writing system, right? And so a lot of the Han languages get cut out of that as well. No resources, no funding, no institutional reproduction. And so that's an assimilatory force. When you provide no support for a language, that drives people into better supported languages. So most of the languages in China get pushed into that situation. Then you have the remaining 56 languages, and there is a clear hierarchy amongst those where you have um, 普通话, the national language, Mandarin Chinese at the top. That is compulsory for everyone in China to learn. That's mandated by law. There are massive resources put into universalizing the language. There are targets set to increase the percentage of people in the country who speak 普通话 and so on. Then the other 55 languages, which are the designated single minority languages for each of the minorities, like they're optional. You can use them. There are laws that say that they could be used, they should be used, but there's nothing making any of those languages compulsory in any situation at all. And so that creates again an incentive structure where people are driven towards 普通话at the expense of those minority languages.